Welcome back to The Art of Zeus, a series on intermediate and advanced concepts of the Arma 3 Zeus game mode. In this episode, we'll be focusing on communication and roleplay. Beyond any shadow of a doubt, communication and roleplaying are the most difficult parts of Zeus to do correctly. This is mainly because, for the most part, it is out of your control on how well it is received. A terrible Zeus can be dealt a perfect hand of conditions that make communication a breeze, and a great Zeus can be handed a perfect storm of bad luck that can result in lackluster roleplay and awful communication. Before I get into the nitty-gritty, there's one thing that must be said. Shut the fuck up. I swear to God, if I hear that Zeus start a sentence again with the words, "be advised," I'm going to throw my monitor out a window. People talk way too much in public Zeus. Game masters more so than anybody else. For some reason, a bad game master loves to talk a lot. This is usually based on some sort of high command roleplay where they're giving you a briefing, intel that you shouldn't be getting, or doing the planning for you. Don't do this. While there are many valid reasons to act as high command, a majority of players don't approach it with the right mindset. Acting as a command entity has its place and can be done in a way that creates an immersive environment for everybody. Most of the time, however, it is simply used because they either don't know how to do it any other way, or they want to micromanage the players in the context of the current objective, so it can be done their way. See Railroad Zeus is for this. Or because that's how their favorite community figurehead does it. Another problem excessive talking creates is cluttered voice channels, and you could argue this is actually the primary problem with it. While you may not recognize it when you're playing as Zeus or GM, when you talk on global, you're actively suppressing your players' ability to communicate. Players who can't communicate will not be able to effectively work as a team, which in turn affects their combat performance and by extension, their opinion of your mission. There's a direct correlation with how much you talk and how high quality your mission is. The best GMs will only give a briefing at the start of the mission, then be completely silent for the rest of the mission, only talking when absolutely necessary. Instead of talking over a voice, use hint and objective modules to convey the messages you want to your players. It's easy for players not to hear or not understand a vocal order when there's so much going on in voice chat, but nobody can say it was too loud to read a short bit of text that appears on screen. Another reason GMs talk so much is that they're worried that a heavy asset they place may cause excessive destruction to the players, such as a tank, heavy gunship, enemy QRF, or indirect fire support, and they feel that if they don't tell the players, they'll get absolutely destroyed and therefore get angry at them. If you're a GM that calls out approaching threats, stop. You're hurting your mission. Many players love playing a recon role, and if you hop on global and say, "satellite imaging has spotted XYZ heading your way," you're killing that facet of gameplay in your mission and lulling your players into a sense of security that they think you'll tell them anytime any threat worth mentioning is coming. When I play on the ground, I prefer an Overwatch role, sitting on a nearby hilltop with a Titan anti-tank launcher, safeguarding the general infantry from QRF teams. If players in your mission aren't running security, then they deserve to be punished by a tank or gunship ripping them a new asshole. Don't soften the blow by magically telling them that a large threat is coming. Playing the devil's advocate to this point, you shouldn't be a dominatrix and decimate your players just because they didn't have an Overwatch. Use common sense and assess your player base beforehand to see if they are the kind of players who are capable of the level of communication and teamwork required to coordinate an Overwatch team. Better players are more likely to take a crushing defeat in stride and admit they made a mistake than rookies, who would just see nothing past the direct effect of their own player that they died. Moving back to the topic of communication, don't force your players into groups thinking it will magically fix any problems that may have sprouted up in teamwork. Some players either don't know how to work as a team or are simply not interested. You run the risk of having an incompetent leader elected into the command slot just because no one else spoke up. No commander is better than a bad commander. I've seen hundreds of missions start out where people are at each other's throats and dissolve into complete anarchy because the Zeus refused to place an objective or give players assets until they were organized into groups. Having good communication benefits your mission in a countless number of ways. There are no downsides to increased communication. Ground admins are great for this since they keep side chat under control where a GM admin cannot, since they can't even hear side chat. Good communication also leads to players taking a mission more seriously, which makes them enjoy your mission more. I've personally seen a terrible Zeus mission turned into an excellent experience for the players just because the players were communicating extremely well and not idly chatting on side or group channels. Extending to this point, don't recommend things for your players to do. There are more eloquent and direct ways to confer intel on your player base. Instead of saying something like, "You guys should probably bring anti-tank," say, "You will need anti-tank." Remove as much vagueness as possible from your speech, and your roleplay, briefings, other communications will sound a lot more professional. If you see somebody doing something that looks tactically questionable, ask them what's going on. Don't jump to conclusions. Two common examples that need to be pointed out are individual recon elements and helicopter operations. I've lost count of how many times I've been zapped by a presumptuous Zeus because I decided to walk to the objective and scout instead of waiting at the base that was 3 kilometers away for vehicles. They assumed I was trolling. I was just walking because I knew I would get there before they were ready. I've also lost count of how many times a Zeus has gotten pissy at me because I didn't land at their recommended LZ as a pilot, because I didn't deem their LZ to be very good or safe. Communication refers to more than just how you talk or assign objectives. Your mission has a body language of its own that players listen to, even if neither party is aware of it. If as a Zeus, you place lots of armor and tanks at every objective, your players are likely going to start carrying more anti-tank weapons, even if you didn't tell them to. If you are a pushover who gives people what they want, expect people to start asking for shiny toys more. Make sure you are using the tools at your disposal to create the mission feel that you're aiming for. If you're an admin, for the love of God, please kick people in side chat who talk too much. Even if they mean no harm, idle chit-chat in side or global is a serious detriment to communication mission quality. Memesters and stream of consciousness players mentioned previously in my previous episodes are the big perpetrators here. Constantly giving players one more chance to do the right thing is a bad approach because in a majority of cases, as an admin, you have to draw the line about how much gossip and chit-chat is too much. Be prepared to kick players when they cross that line. Since this seems a good episode as any to bring this up, don't ask players who's a good pilot or who wants to pilot. I see this happen in almost every single round I play in. It's as infuriating to witness as it is harmful to your mission. When you ask players who wants to fly or who is a good pilot, very rarely do you actually end up with a good pilot. Why do you think this is? The results have everything to do with the circumstances in which the question is raised, rather than the skill level or confidence of the players in your server. Asking players who wants to fly is actually the best way to get the worst pilots in the server. Let's take an example from start to finish and see why this happens. You start with players gathered around a spawn, FOB, base, whatever, and your mission is ready to go. You've set everything up the last few minutes, and you're ready to get moving. At some point, either earlier or just now, you decide that the players would be, or by necessity, have to fly to the objective. This is common on Malden or Tanoa, where ground transport is extremely difficult across long distances. The moment you let slip that there's a possibility of pilot roles, a handful of people start instantly begging on global for be the pilot. Let's, for this example, say 3 people start begging. Being a good Zeus that you're trying to be, you don't want to keep players idling any longer than they already have been, so you pick one of these players on the spot. You pick player, let's say there's A, B, and C. You pick player B because he doesn't have the squeaker voice that player A has, and he's been playing well with the people where player C just joined. Logical. You place the chopper or the cast down, and the players go on their merry way towards the objective. 5 minutes later, you see that asset you gave them in a ball of flame, severely damaged, or something similar. What happened? You picked the best available candidate from the choices given to you, and they still fumbled it. So let's rewind the scenario back to where before we picked anybody. Why are these 3 people so excited to be pilot? In so lies the problem. Piloting takes patience, and these 3 players jumped out of their pants at the prospect of getting to fly. Want to know who's most excited to fly? People who haven't flown very much. By simply picking the first voices that chirp up, the good odds are you're actually picking one of the worst pilots on the team. This is a coin flip for transport helicopters, but that probably jumps to almost 100% when you're picking cast pilots. In my 3,000 hours of Arma 3, I've probably only seen 20 exceptional cast pilots and maybe 200 good cast pilots. And without exception, they are the quieter, more reserved players when using vocal chat. They're more willing to type than talk. That's not saying they don't talk or they don't have a mic, because they do and they definitely should, but a good pilot doesn't spam voice channels. Additionally, a good pilot will never crash unless they're forced into unreasonable odds, such as being shorthanded on sorties with fighters or unidentified radar AA SAM platforms for rotor gunship. A capable pilot or pilot-gunner combo with enough ammo can single-handedly decimate entire divisions without enemies returning fire for a single shot. If you see a pilot doing gun runs on unidentified space where there might be AA, they're not a good pilot. They're not even a mediocre pilot. They're a terrible, impatient pilot, and they should not be allowed to fly. So how do you know who is a good pilot? There are a few subtle ways to find an ace pilot in your player base. First, as I said before, keep an eye out for players who talk but also type, and don't spam voice chats. Pilots who love to chit-chat excessively will be likely to spam chat, updating their team about what they're doing, where they're doing, and bothering them for 9 lines when they get bored. For obvious reasons, don't let the squeaker or the memesters fly, because that is just asking for problems. Players who show maturity, remain calm during firefights, and get along with others well are usually the safer choices than who's the loudest person who asked first, or who's been asking for hours. If you're enjoying this series, let me know. I love introducing people to the Zeus game mode, and I always appreciate feedback on my work, and I hope to see you again soon.